Italian Mafia boss saw his enemy's pregnant daughter crying. "He won't touch you again." The yelling hit the walls like a punch, crashing through the doorway as the pregnant girl flinched, her hands covering her stomach while her father's voice tore in her. The humiliation burned into her skin as he shouted the same words he'd been repeating for months, calling her a disgrace, calling the child a mistake, calling her weak for crying. She tried to stand, but her knees buckled, and when she slipped, he didn't reach to help. His shadow towered over her, cold and merciless, and she closed her eyes, wishing the pain in her chest would stop. He turned away with disgust, leaving her trembling on the floor as the door slammed like a final verdict. That was the moment the Italian Mafia boss stepped from the shadows, saw her tears, and whispered the words that froze the air between them. "He won't touch you again." Before we go any further, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because what's about to unfold will shake you. This story is about to explode, and you don't want to miss a single second. Her breath trembled as she tried to wipe her cheeks, pretending she hadn't heard him or seen him standing there, but his presence was impossible to ignore. He moved closer without a sound, controlled power in every step, the kind of presence that made grown men straighten their backs and rethink every decision they'd made in their lives. She didn't dare look up, afraid that if she did, her desperation would spill out and make everything worse. But he crouched in front of her, lowering himself to her eye level, forcing her to meet him even when her lashes were still wet. She saw something in his eyes she had never seen from any man in her father's world. A flash of anger, but not at her, anger for her. She tried to stand again, clutching the edge of the bed, but her legs trembled from the strain. He reached out a hand, slow enough that she didn't flinch, steady enough that she trusted it before she realized she had. His fingers slid under her elbow, guiding her gently until she was upright, and something inside her cracked. Not fear, not shame, just exhaustion, the kind that came from carrying pain alone for too long. He asked her something, but she shook her head, not wanting to explain the bruise forming on her shoulder or the echo of her father's insults repeating in her memory. He didn't push. He simply watched her, studying every breath like he was trying to understand the weight she was hiding. Her dress clung to her, silk ruined by tears, and she pressed a hand over her stomach like she was protecting more than a child. Protecting hope. Protecting the last piece of herself. He exhaled once, a slow breath that trembled with restraint, and she felt the shift. It wasn't pity. It was something sharper, something dangerous, something aimed not at her, but at the man who had walked out the door moments earlier. She felt the power behind it, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel exposed. She felt covered, shielded, guarded by a force that was terrifying in the best possible way. She whispered that she was fine, but the lie was thin. Her voice cracked halfway through, and she cut herself off, biting her lip as more tears welled up. When one slid down her cheek, he wiped it away with his thumb, slow, steady, like he had all the time in the world. She froze, stunned at the gentleness, stunned that someone like him, someone feared in every corner of the city, could touch her as though she mattered. The door at the end of the hall cracked open again. Her father's voice barked another insult, but the Mafia boss didn't move. He just turned his head slightly, just enough for the temperature in the room to shift. Her father saw him and froze. The boss stood up, slow and controlled, and the look in his eyes made her father's bluster die instantly. There was no yelling now, no insults, no fury, only fear. Real fear. The kind that made even arrogant men remember they were mortal. Her father tried to retreat, but the boss stepped forward, each movement cutting the air like a blade. She grabbed the edge of the mattress, whispering for him not to start a war over her, but he didn't look back. He planted himself between her and her father like a wall, like a promise, like an oath carved from steel. Her father tried to speak, but the boss didn't give him the chance. He leaned in, voice low enough that only the three of them could hear, and the threat he delivered made her father's legs buckle. She saw it. She saw a grown man shrink for the first time in her life. The silence felt heavy, suffocating, crackling with something that should have set the entire house on fire. Her father left without another word. No slamming door this time, only retreat. When they were alone again, she collapsed back onto the bed, but this time he was ready, catching her before she hit the pillow. She tried to breathe, but everything inside her was trembling. Fear, relief, confusion, gratitude, all tangled together until she couldn't separate one from another. He helped her sit, steadying her with hands that were so careful she almost forgot who he was. She didn't know why he cared. She didn't know why he stayed. She didn't even know why her tears kept falling harder now that the danger was gone. He told her breathe, and somehow she did. She leaned into him without meaning to, her forehead brushing his chest, and he didn't pull away. He held her securely, arms firm around her back, guarding her like she was something priceless. She could feel his heartbeat, calm, steady, controlled, like he was grounding her with every beat. She whispered that she didn't want trouble, didn't want blood spilled because of her, didn't want to be the reason another war lit up the city. He didn't answer, but the way he tightened his arms around her told her everything. The war had already started the moment he saw her cry. He guided her to lie down gently, adjusting the pillow, pulling the covers so they didn't press on her stomach. She felt the warmth of his touch linger, even when he stepped back. She watched him straighten his shirt, eyes still burning with the memory of what he had seen. Before he left the room, he glanced back at her, and the promise in his voice wrapped around her like armor. No one would hurt her again, not while he was breathing. And for the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe it. ChatGPT said. He didn't even make it down the hallway before she pushed herself upright again, breath shaking, fingers gripping the blanket as though letting go would send the whole world crashing back onto her. His presence lingered in the room long after he stepped out, a force pressed into the walls, into her pulse, into the way her lungs finally moved without tightening. She listened to the faint sound of his footsteps, controlled and calm. But beneath that calm, there was something dangerous building. She felt it even from a distance, like a storm tightening its fists. He moved through her father's house like he owned it, and everyone he passed felt the shift. Guards who normally barked orders lowered their eyes. Relatives who used to sneer at her fell silent and froze when they saw who had come out of her room. The message was already spreading even without words. Someone powerful had taken an interest in the one girl this family had tossed aside like broken glass. She tried to breathe steady, but her chest felt too full, too tight, too overwhelmed with everything she was holding in. Relief wasn't a soft thing. It hurt, almost worse than the pain before it. Because now she knew what safety felt like, and she hadn't realized how brutally she needed it until it touched her. Downstairs, her father was pacing, shoulders hunched, hands shaking no matter how tightly he curled them into fists. The boss didn't rush him. He didn't need to. He stood still in the middle of the room, and the silence stretched too long, thick and jagged. Her father swallowed hard, but the fear clung to him like sweat. He tried to speak, tried to justify, tried to explain away months of cruelty toward his own daughter, but the boss didn't blink. He stepped closer, slow, precise. Her father stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet as the truth hit him. This wasn't business. This wasn't negotiation. This wasn't even revenge. This was personal now. Upstairs, she flinched when she heard something crash, followed by a choke sound that wasn't quite a scream, but wasn't controlled either. She pulled herself up, heart pounding, one hand clutching her stomach instinctively. She shouldn't move. She shouldn't get involved. She shouldn't be anywhere near what was unfolding below. But fear tangled with guilt, and she pushed her feet to the floor. Her legs shook underneath her, and she nearly slipped before catching the edge of the nightstand. She whispered to herself that he didn't need her. He was a Mafia boss. He'd faced worse than her father. But she remembered the look in his eyes, sharp enough to cut, soft enough to protect, and something inside her wouldn't let her stay still. She took the stairs slowly, gripping the rail, fighting dizziness. Her heartbeat filled her ears, drowning out everything until she reached the bottom and heard the boss's voice. Low, cold, steady, the kind of tone that made even walls listen. Her father was on his knees in front of him, breath short, fear exposed for everyone in the room to see. The boss didn't raise a hand against him. He didn't need to. His words struck harder than any blow, slicing straight through her father's arrogance. She stepped into the doorway before she could think twice, her fingers curling into the fabric of her dress. The boss turned first, sensing her before he even saw her. His eyes locked on hers instantly, scanning her face, checking her breathing, checking her stance, making sure she hadn't fallen, hadn't been hurt, hadn't overstrained herself. The shift in him was instant. The anger didn't fade, but it refocused, sharpened, redirecting itself toward the real issue, her condition. He moved toward her immediately, leaving her father gasping on the floor. He didn't touch her at first, just stood close enough for her to feel the heat of his worry. She hated that she needed it. She hated how much she didn't want him to step away. She whispered that she was fine, that she just wanted everything to stop before it went too far, but her voice cracked halfway through. She saw the moment he noticed. His jaw tightened, and his chest rose with a slow, heavy breath. He wasn't going to let this go. He placed a hand on her lower back, guiding her away from the room, steering her toward the nearest chair, lowering her gently like she was something breakable. Her hand shook as she gripped the armrests. She whispered for him not to ruin his own life because of her, not to get dragged deeper into a feud that had already cost too much. He leaned down slightly, meeting her eyes, and whatever he said next wasn't loud, but it cut straight through her fear and pinned it to the ground. She wasn't ruining anything. She wasn't a burden. She wasn't a mistake. She wasn't the cause of chaos. Her father was. Her throat tightened, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Not with conviction, not with certainty, not like she mattered enough to fight for. He stood again and turned back toward her father, who was struggling to get up. The boss didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He delivered a warning so lethal in its calmness that even the walls seemed to recoil. Her father tried to protest, to reclaim authority, to insist that she was his daughter and therefore his responsibility. The boss's reaction was immediate and ice-cold. Her father had forfeited that right the moment he chose cruelty over care. The words hit her harder than they hit her father. She felt them all the way through. Someone defending her. Not because it benefited them, not because it was strategic, not because of obligations, but because they believed she deserved protection. Her father hesitated, tried to argue again, but the boss didn't let him finish. A guard stepped forward at a signal so subtle only the boss's men caught it, and suddenly her father was no longer the one in control of his own home. The boss had taken over, not through violence, not through force, but through sheer power. She pushed herself to her feet again, her breath uneven. She begged them to stop, her voice barely strong enough, but he turned back instantly and closed the distance between them in 2 steps. He cupped her cheek, steadying her breathing by drawing her attention solely to him. The world behind him blurred. Her father's outrage, the guard's tension, the weight of the room, it all disappeared. He was the only steady thing in her vision. He whispered that she didn't need to watch this. She whispered back that she didn't want anyone getting hurt because of her. He shook his head once, firm, making it clear that what was happening wasn't her fault. It was consequence. Her legs gave out again, but he caught her effortlessly, lifting her before she even realized what was happening. Her breath hitched as he carried her through the hall, away from the chaos, his arms warm and strong, his grip unshakably secure. She curled into him without meaning to, letting her head rest against his shoulder as her body finally gave in to exhaustion. He carried her all the way back upstairs, refusing to let anyone else lay a hand on her. When he set her down on the bed, she held his wrist for a moment longer than she meant to, not wanting him to leave again. He paused, studying her face like he could read everything she wasn't saying. Then he made a quiet promise, not with words, but with the way he brushed his thumb over her knuckles before releasing her hand. He wasn't going anywhere. Not until she was safe. Not until every threat was gone. Not until every tear she'd shed had been answered. He stayed at her bedside longer than he intended, longer than any Mafia boss should when chaos waited downstairs. But something about the way her fingers trembled against the blanket made it impossible to walk away. Even when her eyes fluttered shut, her breath uneven from exhaustion, she didn't release his hand. And he didn't pull away. Not even when one of his men appeared in the doorway, clearing his throat, trying to hide the urgency burning behind his expression. He carefully slipped his hand from hers, lowering it back onto the sheets. She stirred for a moment, her lips parting like she felt the loss even in sleep. He lowered his voice as he stepped out of the room, telling his men to speak only when they were far enough that she wouldn't hear anything. The hallway felt colder without her presence anchoring him, and the farther they walked, the more the fury he'd been swallowing rose back to the surface. The moment they reached the bottom of the stairs, his men filled him in. Her father had regained enough misplaced arrogance to start barking orders, demanding to know who the hell the boss thought he was, threatening retaliation, even trying to call him backup. The boss didn't break stride. His steps were slow and measured, but every man in the house felt the air around him tighten like a noose. They stepped into the living room, and her father spun toward him, eyes wide with the last flicker of boldness clinging to the edges of panic. The boss didn't shout. He simply walked closer, closing the distance like a shadow, swallowing the light, and her father's voice cracked mid-sentence. He stumbled back again, but the boss caught him by the collar this time, forcing him still, forcing him silent. His voice dropped to a deadly whisper as he reminded her father of every rule their world lived by, every line you don't cross, every consequence you earn with your own cruelty. Her father tried to defend himself, insisting he disciplined his family however he wanted, insisting she was his daughter to control, insisting she was lying, exaggerating, imagining abuse that never happened. The boss didn't even blink. He tightened his grip until her father stopped talking, stopped breathing normally, stopped pretending he had any control over the situation at all. For a long, suffocating moment, no one moved. Then the boss shoved him backward. Her father crashed into the floor, wheezing, trembling, scrambling away like a man trying to outrun his own sins. He called out to his guards, but none of them moved. Loyalty evaporated when fear walked in on 2 feet, and they stood frozen, unable to meet the boss's eyes. The boss didn't touch him again. He didn't have to. He delivered a punishment far worse than a beating. He stripped her father of the one thing these men lived for, authority. In front of everyone in the house, he declared that her father no longer had any claim over her. No right to command her. No right to harm her. No right to breathe a threat in her direction again. Her father screamed back, but the boss cut him down with a single sentence, sharp enough to silence the entire room. Then he gave an order, cold, absolute. His men took her father by the arms and dragged him from the room as he kicked and shouted, demanding release, demanding respect, demanding anything that kept him from facing the truth that had finally come for him. By the time the yelling faded down the hallway, the boss's pulse had steadied. His fury hadn't disappeared. It had simply refocused, sharpening into purpose. He turned away from the chaos, heading back toward the stairs, feeling the weight of every moment pressing behind his ribs. He had come here to settle a feud, deliver a warning, maybe even negotiate terms. He had not come expecting to find a pregnant girl crying in bed, abandoned by the very people who should have protected her. He hadn't come expecting to care. He reached her doorway again, but something in him paused before entering. She was still sleeping, her breathing soft, her face calmer than before, though faint tracks of tears still glistened on her cheeks. The room felt warmer around her, calmer, almost fragile. He stepped inside, quietly, the anger draining from his muscles with every breath she took. He sat on the edge of the chair closest to her bed and watched her for a long moment, tried to understand why his chest felt so tight. She shifted in her sleep, whispering something too faint to hear, reaching out blindly with her hand like she was searching for something, someone. Instinct moved him before thought did. He stood and gently took her hand again, letting her fingers settle between his. Her body relaxed instantly, a small breath escaping her lips. Something in him broke and reformed at that moment. He didn't let go. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time blurred into a slow, steady rhythm of her breathing and the quiet thrum of his own heartbeat. When she finally stirred awake, She blinked up at him with confusion first, then relief so raw it hit him like a punch. She tried to sit up, but he placed his free hand on her shoulder, steadying her, whispering for her to go slow, reminding her she wasn't alone anymore. She whispered his name, barely audible, but it carried enough emotion to knock the air from his lungs. She asked what happened, if her father was coming back, if things were about to get worse. He leaned closer and told her she didn't need to fear him anymore. She asked why he was doing this, why he cared, why he'd stepped in when he had nothing to do with her pain. He didn't answer immediately, not because he didn't know, but because saying it aloud felt too exposed, too real. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough around the edges. He told her that sometimes people step in simply because the world has failed you for too long. Sometimes someone sees what others have ignored. Sometimes saving someone else saves a part of you that you didn't realize was broken. Her eyes filled instantly, tears spilling over before she could stop them. She tried to apologize for crying again, but he leaned closer and wiped the first tear with his thumb, slowly, carefully, like she was something precious he had no intention of letting break again. She whispered that she didn't deserve this kind of protection. He whispered that she deserved far more than she'd ever been given. She tried to pull her hand away, overwhelmed, but he tightened his grip just enough to keep her grounded. She asked what would happen now, what her father would do next, what her future looked like now that everything had exploded around her. He didn't promise her easy answers. He didn't lie. He simply told her 3 things with a certainty that made her breath hitch. She wasn't alone anymore. She was safe, and he wasn't done protecting her, not even close. Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs, but this time they weren't from fear. Something inside her cracked wide open, releasing every moment of pain she'd locked away. He held her hand through all of it, letting her cry until her breathing steadied again, until the storm inside her softened to a trembling calm. She whispered one final question, her voice fragile but hopeful. Why her? He didn't answer with words. He lifted her hand slowly and pressed a soft, deliberate kiss to her palm. Gentle enough not to scare her, firm enough to make sure she felt every ounce of the truth he couldn't speak aloud yet. Then he looked at her, really looked at her, and the fire in his eyes made her whole world stop. He wasn't helping her out of obligation. He wasn't helping her out of pity. He was helping her because something in her had pulled him in, anchored him, claimed him in a way he hadn't expected and couldn't resist. And he wasn't letting go. Not now. Not after this. Not ever. He reached for the gun tucked behind his back, but Damon was faster, slamming his wrist against the table and making the weapon skitter across the floor. The sound echoed like a starting pistol for chaos itself. And in that instant, everyone inside the safe house froze, the tension snapping so hard it felt like the air itself cracked open. Damon didn't wait for the shock to settle. He lunged, grabbing the man by the collar and whipping him forward with a force that sent both of them crashing into a stack of crates. Isla stumbled back, heart pounding so violently it rattled through her limbs, but she kept her eyes on Damon because the switch in him was instant. Cold, lethal, silent. Exactly what she feared and needed at the same time. The man tried to push up, but Damon pinned him with a knee to the chest, his forearm crushing down on his throat. Isla shouted for him to stop, but he didn't even blink. The man's fingers clawed at Damon's arm, desperate, shaking, failing. Damon leaned in with that old assassin control, his voice low, barely above a breath but sharp enough to slice through steel. He told the man that trying to betray him was the last mistake he'd ever make. The guy's eyes widened, flicking toward Isla like she was some kind of salvation, but she froze, helpless, unsure if stepping forward would save a life or end hers. Damon pressed harder. The man's face purpled. Isla gasped and grabbed Damon's arm, telling him he already proved his point, that killing him now wouldn't change anything, but Damon didn't move. His jaw flexed, his muscles locked, and for a second Isla saw it. He wasn't killing the man because he needed information. He was killing him because it kept him from looking at her, seeing her tears, feeling anything. She pushed harder, her nails digging into Damon's skin, and he snapped out of the haze long enough to loosen his hold. The man coughed, choking, dragging air into his lungs, and Damon shoved him aside like trash, rising to his feet with a kind of controlled fury that made the entire room tremble. Isla backed up instinctively, but he grabbed her arm, not rough, not gentle, just firm and final, and pulled her toward the door. She kept telling him she wasn't running anymore, that she wasn't going back to the life she escaped, but Damon didn't listen. He dragged her outside like the firestorm around them wasn't exploding. The night air hit them like ice. Damon cursed under his breath, pulling her toward the car, but Isla yanked her arm free and demanded answers. Damon spun so quickly she felt the wind shift. He told her that her husband's men were already on the move, that the safe house was compromised, that staying here another second meant death. But Isla didn't care about any of that. She wanted to know why Damon had looked at her inside that room like he was choosing between saving her or destroying everything in his path. He didn't answer. He just opened the door and told her to get in. She refused. He stepped closer. She stepped back. He called her stubborn. She told him to stop treating her like she was some assignment he could drag around in silence whenever it suited him. Damon froze. Really froze. Like her words cracked through the assassin armor he'd spent years building. He told her she wasn't an assignment. Not anymore. That hit her harder than he expected, and it hit him too, because he swallowed like the weight of what he said landed on his chest just as heavy. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but gunfire tore through the night, spraying sparks across the car door, and sending Damon lunging forward to shove her down behind the bumper. Isla screamed as bullets clipped the metal inches above them, and Damon cursed, grabbing her waist and pulling her even lower. The shots kept coming, rapid, unsteady, desperate. Damon peeked over the edge, spotted the direction, and pushed Isla toward the back of the car while he drew his own weapon. He fired twice. One shout from the darkness signaled a hit. Isla trembled but followed Damon's movements, trusting him not because he asked her to, but because the danger had forced the truth. Only he stood between her and death. Damon grabbed her hand and told her to run, and she sprinted with him toward the tree line, bullets chasing them like angry fireflies. Branches whipped her arms and legs. The ground slipped beneath her feet, but Damon's grip stayed tight, unshakable, determined. They reached a steep drop, and Damon didn't hesitate. He pulled her with him, and they tumbled down the slope, rolling through dirt and stones until they hit the bottom hard enough to knock the breath out of them. Isla tried to get up, but Damon wrapped an arm around her shoulders, steadying her. She felt his heartbeat slamming against her back. Too fast, too human, too raw for the man she thought had no emotions left. They didn't stop moving. Damon pushed forward, scanning every angle, every shadow, every sound. Isla kept close, her breath shallow but controlled, her pulse racing but steadying as she synced with his pace. The forest around them grew darker, but Damon's presence made her feel like she wasn't stumbling through chaos. She was pushing through it with purpose. When they finally stopped near an abandoned cabin hidden behind thick brush, Damon pressed a finger to her lips, signaling silence, and then listened. His breathing calmed instantly, slipping into that assassin stillness she'd seen glimpses of but never this close. After a long moment, he nodded. They weren't followed. Inside the cabin, the air was thick, cold, stale, but safe. Damon checked every corner before letting her move freely. Isla leaned against the wall, trying to steady her breath. Damon paced, hand in his hair, clearly furious, not at the attack, but at how close she came to getting hit. She told him he wasn't responsible for her. He whipped around and said she had no idea what she was talking about. She told him she wasn't his weakness. He said she already was. The air between them cracked open again, but this time not with bullets. This time with something hotter, more dangerous, something neither of them wanted to talk about, but both of them felt growing with every heartbeat. Isla told him that she didn't ask him to care, and he stepped closer, telling her that it wasn't something he decided. It just happened. She didn't move. He didn't move. For a moment, all the fear, all the adrenaline, all the chaos melted in a tension so thick it wrapped around them like fire. Then footsteps echoed outside. Damon grabbed her and pulled her behind a cabinet, his hand over her mouth, his body pressed against hers as he listened with deadly focus. The footsteps grew closer, crunching leaves, snapping sticks, and Isla felt Damon's heart hammering through his chest and her back. The shadow passed the window. Isla held her breath. Damon leaned in, whispering that if anything happened, she should run and not look back. She shook her head. He told her again. She refused again. The shadow reached for the door. Damon tightened his grip. The latch moved. Isla's pulse exploded. The door creaked open, and everything ignited. The door slammed inward and Damon launched first, grabbing the intruder by the throat and slamming him so hard against the wall the wooden frame cracked. Isla stumbled forward, adrenaline blasting through her veins as Damon pinned the man with deadly precision, one knee crushing into his ribs. The intruder gasped, reaching for a hidden blade, but Damon smashed his hand against the wooden floor so brutally the weapon dropped instantly. Isla froze only a second before instincts kicked in. She snatched the blade and held it firmly, chest heaving, ready to strike if Damon needed backup. The intruder wheezed, muttering something that made Damon's jaw clench tight. Isla stepped closer, demanding to know who sent him. Damon pushed harder, his voice burning like fire as he ordered the man to speak. The intruder finally croaked out the truth. Her father's men had sold her location. They were coming, not to bring her home, not to talk, to end her, to end the child. Isla's knees nearly buckled. Damon didn't blink. He lifted the man by his shirt, slammed him again, and promised he'd never get the chance to repeat those words. The man tried to spit in Damon's face, but Damon twisted his arms back, knocking the air from his lungs with ruthless efficiency. Isla felt something inside her break. Fear, anger, grief, all of it coiling into a single sharp thread. She stepped forward, raising the blade. Damon didn't stop her. He didn't even look at her. He just held the man still. Isla pressed the knife to the intruder's throat, her hand steady in a way she didn't know she was capable of. She told him that no one, absolutely no one, was going to touch her baby ever again. The man trembled. Damon's grip tightened, and Isla dragged the blade across the wall beside the intruder's head, letting him hear the metal scrape with lethal intention. He broke instantly, rambling names, locations, numbers, everything. Damon released him with just enough space for Isla to step back. Then Damon knocked him unconscious with one precise strike. Damon grabbed Isla's face, forcing her to look at him. Not in anger, in urgency, in fear, in something deeper than anything either of them had admitted. He told her they were out of time. Her father was sending a kill squad. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were the ones he used when he wanted someone erased from the world. Damon grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the door, but she jerked back. She told him she wasn't running anymore. She said she wouldn't hide while men hunted her child. Damon stared at her like she'd become something new, something stronger, something unstoppable. He nodded, not in agreement, in respect. They moved fast, slipping through the trees, crossing the ridge, and racing toward an abandoned road where Damon had hidden a backup car. Isla's breath was sharp and fast, but she kept pace. Damon worked like a machine, unlocking the car, checking the surroundings, guiding her inside, his mind clicking through strategies like a man who had spent his life dancing with death. The engine roared to life, and Damon slammed his foot on the gas. Isla watched the forest blur past them, but she saw it too late, the line of black SUVs blocking the road ahead. Damon cursed, spinning the wheel so hard the tires screamed. Isla grabbed the dashboard, bracing herself as they veered sharply to the right, but the forest wasn't empty anymore. Men poured out from behind the trees, like shadows, finally stepping into their moment. Damon drove straight through them. Gunfire erupted, shattering the back window. Isla screamed as bullets tore through the back seat, glass exploding like ice. Damon shielded her with his arm while he kept driving, his other hand steady on the wheel. One shot hit the tire, and the car lurched violently. Damon forced it off the path, jumping the ditch with a sickening crash. Isla felt the world flip sideways for a second before they skidded to a stop. Before she could breathe, Damon grabbed her hand and pulled her out. They ran again, branches slashing their clothes, roots catching their feet, their lungs burning. Damon kept her close, always shielding her, always watching the shadows. They reached a clearing where an old stone shed stood crooked and half collapsed. Damon pushed her behind it, just as more bullets tore through the air. Isla covered her stomach, instinctively protecting her child. Damon fired back with precision, dropping 2 men instantly. But more kept coming. Isla grabbed a fallen pipe and held it tight, prepared to fight if anyone got close. A man lunged from behind the shed. Isla didn't think. She swung. The pipe cracked across his cheekbone, sending him crashing to the ground. Damon saw it, stunned for half a breath before pride flared in his eyes. He eliminated the men, closing in on the left, then grabbed Isla again. He told her they had one final advantage, the cliffside bunker her father thought Damon didn't know about. Isla blinked in shock. Damon admitted he used to work with her father before they became enemies. Before her father betrayed him. Before everything changed. They reached the bunker entrance as men closed in from every direction. Damon shoved her inside. Isla stumbled backward, shouting his name. But he didn't enter. He stayed outside, gun raised, posture unshakable. He told her he wasn't letting her father touch her. He wasn't letting anyone touch her. Not while he was still breathing. Isla screamed at him to come inside, but he didn't move. He fired again, dropping more attackers, reloading with terrifying calm. Isla felt tears burn her cheeks as she watched him fight an army alone. She grabbed another gun inside the bunker, stormed to the doorway, and fired beside him. Damon whipped his head toward her, disbelief in his eyes as she took down one of the men aiming for his back. Damon's chest rose with pride, fury, fear, all of it crashing together. He didn't pull her back inside. He didn't tell her she was in the way. He let her fight. Together, they pushed back the kill squad until only 2 men remained. One stepped forward. Her father. He sneered at Damon, calling him filth, a traitor, a mistake. Then he looked at Isla with pure disgust, calling her a disgrace, telling her she was dead to him the moment she chose love over power. Damon stepped in front of her. Her father raised his gun. Isla didn't wait. She raised hers. But Damon fired first. A single shot. Her father collapsed. Isla's chest ripped open with emotion, grief, relief, heartbreak, freedom. She dropped to her knees as Damon caught her, pulling her against his chest, whispering that she was safe, that her child was safe, that no one would ever hurt her again. And for the first time since she ran from her old life, she believed him. She cried into his shirt, shaking, overwhelmed, while Damon held her so tightly she could feel the tremble in his own breath. He wasn't just protecting her. He wasn't just fighting for her. He was choosing her. The chaos settled. The gunfire stopped. The danger faded into the forest behind them. Damon lifted her face, brushing away her tears with a gentleness no one would ever believe came from the feared Italian Mafia assassin. He told her she wasn't alone anymore. She whispered that she never wanted to run again. Damon pressed his forehead to hers as the sun began to rise behind them, warm and golden, almost like a blessing. And for the first time, they looked toward a future that wasn't built on fear, but on something stronger. Something earned. Something faded. Their war ended at the cliffside bunker, but their story didn't. Damon became her shield, her salvation, her second chance. Isla found strength she didn't know she possessed. Together, they faced the world with the kind of loyalty born in fire, survived through sacrifice, and sealed by love they could finally claim. Protecting someone isn't weakness. Loving them enough to stand against the world is the real strength. Subscribe now for more thrilling love and danger stories. Comment your city and time. Share this episode everywhere. Don't miss the next heart-stopping Mafia twist.